never maybe been easier to start an e-commerce store, never been more difficult to grow a profitable e-commerce business. Hey folks, Karl O'Brien here, co-founder of StoreHero. Really our goal as a platform is to help e-commerce brands and agencies get a profit first view of their business.
Through an agency, through StoreHero, you can get access to numbers that actually are going to make a difference.
Can we actually bring it back to the business fundamentals? At the end of the day, ROAS isn't going to pay your tax bill.
Big brands that are coming to us where they're losing significant money and they had no idea. They absolutely no idea, because
like anything, what gets measured gets managed. And what we've found is the best brands in the world don't actually have fantastic ROAS or this magic secret sauce, but oftentimes the bigger lever is,
what are you seeing in the data right now? What is sticking out like a sore thumb to you that brand operators need to know? I'm delighted today to be joined by Karl O'Brien, co-founder of StoreHero. We met, 2 years ago now, I think it was?
Yes, 100%.
At an Ecom event in London. Probably over a few too many wines, I imagine it, at the time.
Might have helped.
And I think that it was quite a natural relationship that started to build, wasn't it? I think we obviously both are obsessed with Ecom, us as an agency, and you guys obviously with the tool you're building. And I guess we've been working super closely over the last 2 years to, one, you guys helping to build everything that we're doing at Prospa, and then our side helping you guys to develop and build, what we want to see within StoreHero to help our brands, which has kind of been great. And it's been amazing that you guys have been open to, listening to our ideas. And obviously we've taken so much from you guys too. Obviously excited for the conversation today and really, I guess, diving into how ecom's changed over the last few years, why StoreHero is so important. And I guess we're both in a really privileged position that we're across so many different brands, you, all the brands you've got on your StoreHero, and then us, all the brands that we work with. So we're able to see a plethora of brands that, we can see what's good, what's bad, give advice to what brands should be doing. So I think a good place to start would be, I guess, the story of StoreHero.
Sure.
How it started and over the last couple of years, what's been changing.
100%. So ultimately the essence of StoreHero is really to help e-commerce brands and agencies get a more profit first view of their business. So, and again, very much in line with that's the reason why we got chatting and ultimately had a shared approach to e-commerce. So my own background, I actually ran a digital marketing agency in Ireland, saw that dynamic over the last 6-7 years, where it's never maybe been easier to start an e-commerce store, but it's maybe never been more difficult to grow a profitable e-commerce business. They're two distinct things. So from my side, I was trying to make decisions from an agency perspective without visibility on, what are the true levers of growth? The expectation was, previously we might have been in a position whereby we were running ads. We didn't know exactly how much profit they were generating, but we were reasonably confident they were generating something. The cash balance in the business looked like it was rising. So on that basis, we didn't have to dig as closely. That's no longer the case anymore. E-commerce brands need to get really specific and dialed in to know, is the decision to increase or decrease spend, whatever impact it has on sales, actually going to lead to more profit? So in essence, really from a StoreHero perspective, that was the piece we wanted to try to bring to the table, a different approach, a profit first approach, and ultimately a much better way to think about growing your business profitably.
I think we've obviously massively seen that, and I think for agencies now, and me and Jack, obviously co-founder of Prospa, speak about this a lot. We felt 3-4 years ago that a lot of agencies, us including, were just running ads, and that was the landscape, and every agency was doing that. There might have been some big agencies that might have had MMM models or something around that, but there really wasn't anything for your kind of Shopify brands doing 2 to 20 million that didn't have the budget for that. And I guess you had some measurement tools, Triple Whale, Northbeam, Phosphor, but nothing that was that accountancy software for brands, but also gave a lot more. In terms of what you're seeing, where would you say the sweet spot is for brands revenue wise that are coming onto StoreHero at the moment?
I think another reason why I think our partnership has always worked really well, it's probably in a similar boat. I think especially businesses maybe up to that kind of 30 or 40 million, ultimately I think a lot of the times in the last couple of years, attribution really became the be-all and end-all of a lot of the conversations. And while it can be an important part, the concept of getting more visibility across those kind of unit, that kind of proportion of spend across channels is great in theory, But oftentimes, a lot of businesses were skipping the fundamentals, the unit economics of their business, which in reality was a much bigger driver, a blocker, or actually a limiter to actually them growing in the first place. From a StoreHero perspective, our big focus has been, can we actually bring it back to the business fundamentals? At the end of the day, ROAS isn't going to pay your tax bill. You need to try to, solve that disconnect that can often happen in businesses, where ultimately marketing metrics make up a lot of the day-to-day conversations, but it doesn't seem to line up with the P&L the accountant sends at the end of the month if you're lucky. So with that in mind, how can we give businesses those kind of more profit-oriented numbers to look at on a day-to-day basis, and then not get a shock when they get that P&L from the accountant?
Really interestingly, actually, you kind of said that 30 million. One thing I've noticed is brands think every other brand has stuff figured out, right? I think that's like the thing here. Why are they scaling? And actually, I spoke to somebody from Pets at Home the other day that leads the Ecom at Pets at Home, and I showed him StoreHero as part of what we're doing. We're having a great conversation. He was blown away, and the reason he was blown away is because even at Pets at Home level, he has no visibility over anything that is in your platform. And that's a brand doing, I don't know, what would you say, 70, 80, 90 million, probably more, and don't have that level of visibility. So what I think is incredible is that brands that wouldn't have been able to afford this in the past and wouldn't have had this visibility in the past are now able to get this through an agency, through StoreHero, can get access to numbers that actually are going to make a difference. And I think that's something that probably, even when I was having that conversation with me, blew my mind. And have you seen that before with bigger businesses?
100%, because I think you're completely right. Everyone has a perception that everyone else has it figured out. And what we've found is the best brands in the world don't actually have fantastic ROAS or this magic secret sauce in terms of running ads. They've gotten very good at those elements, and those are a part of it. But oftentimes the bigger lever is they've understood their unit economics and know exactly how much they can scale, where they can push, where they need to pull back. And oftentimes people have to kind of wrap themselves in a bit of a pretzel and spend a lot of time to try to critically answer a couple of questions. What sort of profit am I actually generating on my first order? What's a customer truly costing me to acquire? And ultimately, what is that customer worth to me over time? And if we understand those fundamental pieces of the puzzle, then ultimately we're in a much better position to know what action to take next, which, to your point, like businesses of every size really struggle to get that. So like businesses over maybe that 30, 40 million mark, they might have a value in attribution as well, but they're still missing that unit economics piece. And the one thing I found was, as much as kind of, more data and availability of data has kind of come about for brands over the last couple of years, brands, on aggregate weren't any more profitable. And like anything, what gets measured gets managed. If you're in a position where you can actually make those profit-oriented decisions, it's not by accident that your profitability is naturally going to improve.
What I'd like to dig into is that I think over the last, we say this every year, but over the last few years, Ecom has changed massively. I think there was a bit of a golden era, COVID, post-COVID, that kind of time where, we talk about it a lot. There was, a massive boom in Ecom. And I think that what we've seen especially is 2025, 26 has been tough for a lot of brands. A lot of brands coming to us. And, I always say there's two real types of brands that come to us, is the plateauer and the person that's in decline, right? That's kind of had 6-12 months of decline and, doesn't know where to go. What do you think is causing brands to not, I guess, think about or not understand what's changed in the landscape? And also, what are they refusing to believe? What are they refusing to go, actually, I need to start thinking about this now?
I think one of the biggest challenges they face is everyone wants to see that revenue number go up. And that's the number you're looking at on a day-to-day basis in Shopify. It feels, okay, if that is increasing, my fundamentals are better. But that's just ultimately not the case. So I think the chickens have come home to roost a little bit for brands, whereby the kind of years of maybe cheaper acquisition costs, but also cheaper availability of capital to kind of give yourself a little bit more time to kind of figure this out. We've had maybe built a kind of a base of repeat customers there that we are able to kind of drive some incremental revenue from. But now we're feeling the pain and maybe feeling the struggle there of actually things tighten up a little bit and actually needing to look back at those unit economics. What a lot of the best brands in the world we're seeing doing is they're actually making those kind of more profit first decisions and kind of reverse engineering success through that lens of profitability. So one thing we did is we launched a goals builder and a forecast builder in StoreHero. And the whole essence of that is not necessarily just to set like an arbitrary marketing budget and say, okay, I'm just going to close my eyes here. This is what I'm going to spend and this is the kind of magic return I expect. But here's the outcome I want to achieve. Here's exactly what I need to spend to get there. And here's actually the return I need to get there as well. So as a broader approach, I think businesses that are kind of giving themselves a better opportunity to succeed are going to be in a position to do so as well.
Mm-hmm. The question I guess that everyone probably wants me to ask you, and I think is important, is, like we mentioned at the start, you're over hundreds and hundreds of brands. What are you seeing in the data right now? What is sticking out like a sore thumb to you that brand operators need to know?
From our perspective within the StoreHero platform, we have visibility and can ultimately see benchmarking data across nearly 1,000 brands in about 15 countries. And that's a cumulative about 10 billion in US dollars in revenue. So ultimately you see trends and patterns at that scale. As a general principle, we're seeing businesses up about 20% on aggregate year to date, but their profit might only be up like 4 or 5. Mm-hmm. So ultimately what that's telling us is, while people are still growing on aggregate, we might have a slightly more ambitious, kind of a stronger subset of the e-commerce kind of category overall, but they're needing to work harder to generate that incremental profit. And they're needing to put themselves in a position to say, well, actually, what's my outcome here? If I want to sell my business, I can't just look at that top line revenue number. Mm-hmm. I need to actually dive into the details. I can't just have my team focused on a ROAS number, experiencing that disconnect. I actually need to have everyone operating on an even playing field. And I think that's oftentimes where we see agencies who don't want to look at StoreHero. That's a massive red flag, I would say, because ultimately your agency is wanting you to be more in the dark, mm-hmm. and actually making decisions with a lack of awareness on your numbers, which isn't a good fundamental relationship to have. And it's no accident then that oftentimes brands feel a bit of a disconnect or a bit of contention with their agencies, because they're trying their best to operate from their perspective with the information they have available to them. But at the end of the day, without visibility on what my actual unit economics are, do I need a 4 ROAS? Do I need a 2.3? Every business is going to be completely different. So the businesses that are working really well are actually able to close that disconnect, get everyone on the same page, and define what success looks like a lot more specifically.
What's interesting is that actually some brand founders, obviously, when brands come to us, I think it's really important, and it's important that everybody knows this is, we get everything, and as you know, from, wages to finance to OPEX, we go right down to the bottom line. Not as important. For us, contribution margin is, obviously the most important place to stop, but it's nice that we can be, sure, for some, as accurate as P&L. We get a lot of brands that get that shock, that, oh my God, I actually didn't know that this was happening. And that can cause some contention, right? Because they're like, no, that can't be true. It is true. And for most brands, in that case, it probably is that repeat is propping up a lot of what they're doing, which is great. And we're seeing a lot of that right now. Big brands that are coming to us where they're losing significant money on that, on that first purchase, which is fine in some instances. And obviously, sure, we have a lot of conversations about this, but repeat is propping up, and they had no idea. They absolutely no idea, because Meta ROAS is saying one thing, PPC ROAS is saying the other, Snapchat is saying something else. StoreHero is telling them they're losing £40 on a first customer. That is a real life thing that's just happened to us. Is that something you see quite often? Definitely.
And I think ultimately, based on the business model, there's a ton of situations whereby that could actually be really feasible. It could work really well. And I think what you need to figure out is, what game are you actually playing as a brand? Are you a furniture business? You're not going to sell a sofa again next month. You need to be profitable day one. Are you a subscription business where you are in an industry that's competitive? You need to be able to aggressively invest in acquiring that customer, but it's not for the good of your health. It's because that profit is to come later down the line. Any business working with an agency needs to be in a position that the agency can tell them something they don't already know. Otherwise, what's the value of that relationship? It's an eye-opening time to actually get visibility, but it's so beneficial then, because oftentimes people are, feel like they've gotten to that point in the business where things are getting saturated. They're, feeling like they're hitting a bit of a brick wall. And oftentimes the solution to their challenge is actually a lot simpler with the benefit of that clarity. So, oftentimes when businesses don't look at these unit economics, they don't look at the commercial side of the business, everything is a ROAS problem. Your ads have to keep on getting more and more efficient, and you have to try to spend more at that better efficiency in order for this system to work. So from a StoreHero perspective, we're actually taking a step back and say, yeah, reducing your acquisition cost, acquiring the right, that customer for the right amount is a really important part of the mix. But let's actually expose all the levers we have to our advantage. We've seen businesses that have actually came to us and said, okay, we have an acquisition cost problem, but it was actually, we could even immediately see, well, that acquisition cost, if you get somebody to buy product A over B, they generate more profit for you today, they generate more profit over time, and they've completely shifted the profitability of the business. My co-founder, Thomas, his family business was like our guinea pig brand when we started with StoreHero. And really one of the kind of disconnects there was an expectation, okay, ROAS has fallen, we need to pull back on budget. And in reality, it was the worst possible decision. But if the burden was on us to articulate why that was the case, and what we were able to show by showing that contribution margin number, or clearly knowing, okay, here's my profit after marketing, am I actually is spending more, putting myself in a better position to succeed? So in that particular situation, which was our kind of first test case of everything, we doubled the ad spend, but in turn doubled the value of the business, because ultimately the business was valued on a net profit basis. So again, that's a significant change, and again feels antithetical to like actually driving more profit. But I don't think anyone should be expected to make those decisions and make aggressive moves. It's more about giving yourself the clarity of what are the actual levers in your business to drive growth, but then from there, the confidence to actually make that decision.
No, I totally agree. Having that visibility for us as an agency has changed everything, as you know. And, I know we talk a lot about it. And, as you know, we kind of absorb the cost of StoreHero for all of our brands. And because we understand how important it is to see that level of visibility. I think one thing that we fight with quite a lot, and we fight with brands is, and really interested to kind of understand your opinion on this, is the link between the ads platforms and StoreHero and the changes that are made within, the ads channel, how they then link back to StoreHero, because we get a lot of, questions. I've changed this within ads and I'm not seeing that shift in StoreHero. Is that a conversation you have quite a lot?
Yeah, I think it's one of the real benefits of StoreHero, to be honest. So ultimately within StoreHero, we're going to show you all the channel level performance. What are the metrics and kind of results that Meta, Google, TikTok are using? And in other words, those are the metrics that it's using to make decisions. But at the same time, within our core kind of dashboard, we'll also not listen to any of them. We'll actually look at how many new customers did you actually acquire? How much did you actually spend on marketing? And on that basis, we have an unambiguous, unbiased view of exactly how much it's costing you to acquire a new customer. That's really beneficial, because over time, what ends up happening is, as a business gets a bit more mature, they maybe have worked with a couple of agencies, they've had different ad structures, and it's very hard to actually thread through, okay, how has my ads approach evolved? How have I kind of shifted a balance between new and repeat customers? So it's a really clear, unambiguous view of exactly what that customer is actually costing. So again, that often will be different than what a channel is saying, but that's the feature, I suppose, not a bug, because ultimately, if you again going back to those fundamentals, which sound, the way I kind of explain it is it's simple but not easy, oftentimes to kind of get to this point, especially without something like ourselves, is again, those key questions. Am I profitable order one? What sort of profit am I generating? What's a customer worth to me? What are they worth over time? With those levers, we can make a ton of really valuable decisions. And all those channel level metrics will definitely work to inform that mix. But at the same time, the bigger lever we see is actually understanding, especially with our forecasting, what's the exact optimal point of growth in your business. Everyone is trying to guess, and we're giving that to people, I suppose, as clear as possible.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like I said, it's a question we get so often.
Yeah.
And, StoreHero is not an attribution channel, but it's always the question is, I've spent X more within Meta and I'm not seeing that direct correlation. And, they're expecting Meta to straight away, have that direct correlation to a contribution margin.
Sure.
And it's like, it's going to take more time for that to flow through, right? And I think that's something that we speak a lot about, and I think it's brands are starting to get more clued up on that, which is great. The
Definitely.
longer they use StoreHero as well, because I think at some point, and I see this a lot, after a few months it starts to click, and it's that
Definitely.
aha moment of, okay, I get it now.
100%. And I think naturally, most e-commerce businesses and founders didn't start as accountants. It wasn't this polished business plan where you built a financial case for why your business is going to succeed. And if you have an e-commerce brand that's working, it's probably because of the fact that you're not an accountant. You've brought, no offense to any accountants, but you brought something to the table, focused on a product, built a brand, built a community. But at the end of the day, whether we like it or not, we're held to account based on the P&L. That really drives everything back in the business. It justifies the kind of value of your time. It justifies the value of your business. And it's what we're working towards. Like, what's the point otherwise? I think the benefit of StoreHero as well is like, okay, you know your industry, you know your business really well. You know, you don't have to become an accountant. If you have something like StoreHero or visibility on that profitability, and especially if your agency is actually working with those metrics in mind, it can kind of mean that it's not an afterthought. Like anything, if profit is an afterthought, you know, if we're not focusing on it as deliberately, then ultimately there may not be as much there as there potentially could be.
I think we touched on benchmarking slightly, and I think everyone would, you know, not be happy if I don't ask you some questions around benchmarking, because I think, you know, we all like to compare ourselves to other people, right? And I get the one all the time, which is I want to be like IM8. I think that's the one that I get the most at the moment. Would love to know some benchmarks. We can start with OPEX if that helps, you know, and work our way through. What are you seeing for brands right now? What are the best brands doing from a benchmarking perspective?
Sure. So we see across the StoreHero ecosystem, the best brands from an operating expense perspective, that's sitting somewhere between 10 and 15% of their net sales.
So it's quite low, really.
Exactly.
You know?
So ultimately what they've been able to do is they've been able to figure out, okay, keep their team lean, focus on a couple of essential team members in-house, and obviously that'll be a different number at scale, of course, but it's kind of representing a reasonable slice of the pie. Ecom as a game, if you're in a service business, that number is going to be a lot higher. But for ecom, you need to leave enough space that, again, businesses that have 20, maybe 30% OPEX, it can be done, but it means your ads have to be crazy efficient and your margins have to be crazy good in order to make that system work. So I think especially, I'm sure we'll touch on it now before we finish chatting today, I think that's also another good option where AI can really come into the mix. Because if we think about that 10 to 15% as not the cost of your team, but the cost of intelligence, whether it's team, whether it's agents, whether it's, you know, external agencies that you're working with, whatever the situation may be, if they can all work together to actually not be kind of sitting too much or taking up too big a slice of the pie, it's really beneficial.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think the OPEX point is interesting, and, you know, a lot of brands struggle with that come to us that maybe got 50, 60% OPEX, and, you know, I talked earlier about the decliner and the plateau, or it might have been that OPEX was fine for, you know, a year ago, 2 years ago, and they're still holding on to all of those expenses, and it might be staffing, warehousing, whatever it is, and it puts such a burden on, you know, on the brand, on us, isn't it? On, you know, to be honest, definitely. On us as an agency, because we're so in the figures, we then, you know, we take that really personally, and, you know, try and affect that. And I think that the interesting thing, and we touched on this earlier, is that the best brands don't have it all figured out, but what they do have figured out is what they can, you know, spend to acquire a customer. You know, and I talk about it all the time to brands, and it's like, you know, they always say, why is this brand able to grow quicker, acquire more customers? It's because they're being more aggressive, right? They understand what that kind of, you know, what their new customer contribution margin needs to be, whether it's positive or negative, right? And what they can actually spend on a new customer. And, you know, I say about Sports Direct all the time, but, you know, they're winning on, for example, Meta, because they know they haven't necessarily got a better margin, or this could be any business, a better margin. Because that's the thing that I get a lot is, oh, that brand can, you know, do better or acquire customers better than me because they've got a better margin. We actually don't tend to find that's the case. A lot of brands have got very similar COGS or margin. They just understand I can go up to X amount to acquire that customer. Is that something that you're seeing from your side too?
Definitely. I think every business is different, and there's a ton of these levers. If Meta ads, you know, your Meta ads dashboard is the only kind of number, it's the dial that you feel like you can change every day, so it's typically the one that people gravitate towards focusing on. The idea of kind of restructuring your COGS is a bigger animal that people maybe get intimidated by, but 100%. I think it's a case of figuring out, like, as a brand, where am I best positioned to have an unfair advantage? For some industries, it's a situation there where, okay, actually, I've better margins, I can actually afford to maybe spend more on my internal team, on marketing. I've given myself the ability and space in that pie chart to do it. Other businesses, maybe actually that's a bit tighter. They're maybe reselling kind of key brands or something like that. They're giving up some margin, but in turn getting the benefit of maybe a cheaper acquisition cost. So as long as there's a balance there, there's no one goal. And even when I'm kind of working with ecom brands who want to try to set a goal, it's never a case where they're like, okay, it's only profit, it's only sales. Naturally, as founders, we're trying to balance a couple of different elements there. You want to not only just be maximize profit for the 31st of December of this year, you want to build longevity into the business and build value in the business as well. So focusing on that, building out a plan that accounts for those and gets them down on paper is it sounds simple, but it just completely changes the game.
I think it's probably time we spoke about AI. Maybe.
Sure.
Yeah.
We got pretty far without bringing it up.
I think we got pretty far without talking about that. Is it a buzzword anymore? I don't know. I'm not sure if it's a buzzword, but
sure.
I know it's something that obviously you guys, we're massively leaning into it as an agency. I could honestly talk about it all day, from the way that we're using creative, the way that we're obviously plugged into StoreHero's MCP to, really easily access data, across every subsect of every brand that we work with. And it gives my team just the ability to see things so clearly without having to spend hours digging into the actual data, because it's there in Slack, ready to go. And I think it's so powerful. And I guess what, I've seen StoreHero change, especially over the last 3 months. And,
sure.
and you guys becoming more of an agent now. So we'd love to kind of dig into, where are you guys going? What are you changing? What problem are you now trying to fix with agents?
Sure. It's ultimately, as a business, we've been on a bit of a journey to, again, ultimately, we're not kind of talking about this shiny, cool attribution window that makes all your numbers look good. We're talking about your fundamental financials that naturally has traditionally required people to do a bit of learning, understand what contribution margin is, understand their gross profit, and therefore there's a level of time and commitment to actually dig into those numbers. AI has completely changed that for us with our growth coach. So previously, where we're ultimately helping train people to kind of diagnose the issues within the StoreHero platform, now our connector for Claude or ChatGPT completely does that. So we would see StoreHero as a profit brain that sits within your Claude account and sits within an agency's Claude account, and therefore the reports and insights you can generate are the equivalent of, someone like me, for example, who spent thousands of hours digging through thousands of stores. Within 2 weeks, our Claude connector was better than me or any of the rest of the team, which is such a testament to the value, I think. The reason why the StoreHero connector, I think, has been so good is not because we have a fancy LLM or custom model, but it's because we have much better data by which these tools can actually use it to make decisions. So with the StoreHero connector, what you can do is it connects in your Shopify data, your marketing data, your SEO, your GA4 data, your product profitability, order profitability, store profitability, country profitability, your lifetime value, but also consider things like internal team conversations, goals, all of these elements. So the answer it's going to give you is so much better. Again, not by magic, but because it has that context. And I think what a lot of agencies who aren't really as commercial oriented are doing, and maybe sometimes internal teams, is they're taking random screenshots from different tools, dropping them into ChatGPT, and you're getting a very surface level report.
Some rubbish.
Yeah.
We've seen some absolute rubbish, right?
Yeah.
With no context. And I think
Definitely.
that's the worst bit.
Definitely.
Is the no context part. That's frustrating.
It's
right?
it's tough because ultimately, like, again, there's only so many hours in the day. If you're getting a report that's not able to go deeper, like, for example, I had a call with a Brian yesterday who saw an inflection point. They saw their ROAS is up, but their profit actually hadn't changed. And immediately StoreHero was able to say, well, it's actually because you just did your free shipping threshold and you kind of took a little bit of margin off there, or maybe this product has a slightly higher returns rate. But even can show the opposite. For example, the StoreHero connector can now pull in things like change history, and it immediately knows, okay, well, your ad performance started to improve there, but we noticed you launched new founder-driven ad creatives, and that's really transformed the account and kind of solve some of the ad fatigue. So by understanding all those elements, again, is the equivalent within the space of 2 to 3 minutes of somebody taking hours upon hours. So that's so beneficial for brands, number one, because ultimately you're getting so much more than that surface level insight, and especially for agencies as well, who can actually focus on the implementation where they're best kind of, I suppose, set up to support, I suppose.
You just spoke about the free shipping threshold now. Honestly, that's a conversation I have so much.
Sure.
Do you guys internally have some sort of a working out to what that should be? Because honestly, that is a question I get daily.
Definitely. I think like so many brands struggle with trying to understand, okay, how can I actually maximize my profit on first order? And all of these elements, whether it's their product cost, their packing, their shipping, their discounts, their transaction fees, all play together. And that free shipping threshold can be, can really make or break, profitability for a business. So we really recommend that a free shipping threshold is at least 10 to 15% above your AOV. Because if we think about it, like, you're giving up some margin there. You're giving up maybe £4 or £5, whatever your shipping cost is. You need to justify that in return. If people are going to spend more than they would otherwise, that's your opportunity there, where you're giving that, but you're getting something in return as well. So every kind of part of the kind of product mix, and that's really where this, like, our growth coach is so beneficial, because it'll understand all those different elements and also consider things like, well, actually, if a customer purchases product A versus product B, they might generate the same profit, but they come back twice as quickly. So you're really focusing on value rather than just looking at that service level number.
Service level stuff. Yeah, it's what we see all the time, and I think we definitely agree on that. What would be interesting to know now, and I know this is probably quite an open question,
sure,
but what does the next 12 to 24 months look like for StoreHero?
It's a really exciting time. Like, from our perspective, we've a very ambitious goals to make StoreHero the most intelligent agent in e-commerce. And we don't say that lightly. We're in positioned, and to be honest, already, I think we can make a good claim as to how we're already kind of ticking that box. But you can imagine how that can expand over time. So if you have kind of a senior strategist in your business, in your brand, in your agency, who's able to understand all of those metrics, understand the business level context, your inventory, your cash flow, and give you such precise recommendations and actually be able to take some of those actions on your behalf. I think that's so important, because ultimately, from an agency's perspective, a big, if you're a brand working with an agency, you want to know that they're utilizing these tools, because at the end of the day, you can get lost down a rabbit hole with AI, but it needs to come back to what I would see as a couple of fundamental elements. How can you use AI to reduce your acquisition cost, increase your first order profit, or increase your lifetime value? Everything else, I think, it has a risk of actually falling into a trap where it's not actually productive or helpful against your time. If you can focus on those fundamentals, that's been the real game changer for brands.
Yeah, because we do see even now a lot of people getting caught up in it and you know, going around in circle after circle, and it's one thing this day, the other thing the next day. And I think it's just having a key plan, and like you said, having those key fundamentals that you're going after. And as an agency, and I say this all of the time, it's like your agency and your internal team need to be working off the same metrics, the same goals, the same figures. And we see when brands come to us a lot, it's that disparity between what internally they're going after and what's important to them, and then what's important to the agency. My opinion is they have to be the same, whether it's an MER goal, an NCPA goal, whatever it might be. I see that as a massive flaw for a lot of brands that come to us.
Definitely. And I think, to be fair to you guys, like, the visibility that gives you, I think, allows you to operate in a way that previously that service may have been reserved for some of the biggest brands in the world who had a team of data analysts to try to understand how all of these decisions impact the bottom line. Like, these tools, and especially our partnership, I think has worked really well, because from our perspective, we want to be that better source of truth, give the reality and actually show all the levers, all the opportunities in front of a brand. And if you have a trusted partner who can actually implement that, understands the commercial realities of your business, doesn't just look at that surface level, channel level performance, then you're onto a winner as well.
I want to obviously talk about what it's actually taking to win now in 2026. I know we've touched on it slightly, but we'd like to go a bit deeper into it. So from our side, there's a couple of things we're seeing. I think the first of all, it's now brands that really understand creative, right? And understand that, one, I think that creative organically and paid is getting closer and closer, right?
Sure.
They're becoming closer and closer. I feel like 2-3 years ago, that gap was massive. What worked on paid and worked on organic was totally separate. But also, and where I caveat this, is that it's important that brands don't see paid as their organic. And still, we're 2026 and brands are still coming to us saying, that's not on brand, that's going to ruin my brand, that's not what I want. And it's, what we're going after on Meta especially, we could talk about any platform, TikTok, sure, Meta, Snapchat, is that first time customer that's never heard of your brand before that we need to hook into, getting you down the funnel. And then they can see more branded stuff, maybe, further down. And I think that's the one fundamental I see. And then the second, which we've obviously spoke about, is then not understanding through all of my paid channels, one, having every channel in silo. I'm getting this ROAS here, this ROAS here, this ROAS here. And as you'll see, and we'll see too, you might over attribute 2, 3, 4 times. So what good is that seeing? And then obviously the third thing is not understanding the fundamentals. So my opinion, I think creatively driven brands that understand that, and then brands that are willing to look at a single source of truth and metric, be MER, be NCPA, be new customer contribution margin. MER is my, as you know, is like my favorite thing at the moment. I think it's where every brand should be looking, especially from a whole ad spend perspective, not just advertising spend, because, as you know, we've worked with brands together that are spending 250, 300,000 on influencers, right? That has to be included in ad spend, MER and everything. So I guess that's what I'm seeing right now. Are you experiencing similar things internally?
Definitely. I think ultimately as kind of the ad platforms have evolved, the kind of media buying has changed. Creatives is your massive lever there for success. And ultimately, again, going back to that concept, whether it's any AI tool should serve to kind of, one of those kind of key boxes should tick is, does it actually effectively help you to lower your acquisition cost? That creative production with a good system and a good kind of team around that, I think has completely evolved. And yeah, if you compare that, completely agree with the financial fundamentals to know exactly how much you can afford to push, I think that's your kind of secret recipe, I suppose, for success, because you don't want to build a plan for yourself that requires an absolute bulletproof, exceptional tightrope walk in order to make it work. It's not the kind of business you want to run as a founder. You want to set yourself up that you have some flexibility. You don't have to be perfect. And again, getting those fundamental pieces right with visibility on what they are is the first step, I suppose.
I think we obviously work across multiple accounts together, and I think one of them is Vanquish Fitness, which we've been working with for a while. I think, it's no secret when they came to us, there was a lot that we had to do and change. And I think that in reality, StoreHero had uncovered a lot of problems that maybe they did or didn't realise, right? And then it was obviously our job together to try and solve that. We've done that through a number of ways. I think biggest success that we saw, I think, internally was one, obviously, like we've said, understanding the numbers. And then how do we practically then go and change that? So now we've understood what our NCAC needs to be across the board and country level too, because these guys are a global brand. They're selling Europe, US, Japan, in the UK. Once we'd got those figures, what did that look like? Now for us as an agency, and I could honestly talk about this all day, Whitelisting has been the biggest success story for Vanquish. So persona-led whitelisting with not only big creators, that helps, but people that I guess the community resonates with. We're not talking here about having to have codes or discount codes or anything around that, but it's giving that visibility across audiences that Vanquish may never have been able to get through whitelisting. And I think that was the key moment for us when we knew, okay, that's what we need to achieve from StoreHero. And I think that's important. How are we then? I think this is where brands kind of think about it the wrong way. Once we've now got our goals within StoreHero, how do we then use our platforms and our channels to then go and achieve that goal? From your side with Vanquish, what have you been seeing?
I think one of the misconceptions maybe people have about StoreHero, a focus on profitability, that would actually just mean doing less, pulling back, being conservative. But it's actually, again, going back to that critical point, it's giving you clarity and confidence on where to double down and where to pull back at the same time. Whether it's for Vanquish, and even we see this broadly, it's like if we can actually see the true impact of all of our activities on those key metrics, what are we actually paying for a new customer? Unambiguous, informed and driven by channel performance, but at the end of the day, showing how it's all working together. It just, again, sets the playing field really clearly. So I know for Vanquish, that was something that was really helpful, going back to those fundamentals. And again, it's always something I'm conscious of repeating sometimes, but it is one of those things I think it justifies repeating as well. If you can see clearly where you are, like as a business, okay, should you be profitable on first order, or do you actually have the lifetime value to be able to double down, can completely shift the profitability of the business, which was the case.
100%. And I think this is a good time, and we've touched on it, but I recently did work on I guess something that we've spoken about a lot, and actually something that's come from you is the profit now, profit soon, profit later kind of metric. I love that, right? I think it's great, and I think the reason I like it is, one, because I can benchmark against what those things are, and secondly, I think it allows brands to start to understand in an easier way what we are talking about. We've got obviously a plethora of brands from, as you know, from fashion, which obviously we're quite heavy as an agency, to subscription, to beauty, to homeware, garden wear, and I think homeware as well is obviously a big one with Kinto and those guys, and they're doing some fantastic stuff. And I think what would be great is to just dive into those 3 key points, what that means, and then what brands should probably be within those kind of key areas. Now, what we tend to see is that the profit now brands are, like you touched on earlier, brands that you're not going to get that repeat rate for a long period of time. That might be a furniture brand or of sorts, or a brand that's got a really cheap product that is a one and buy, right? That you really need to make sure you're making profit on that first time. The second one, which we see a lot, and obviously being very fashion heavy, is one that I would say that we sit a lot into, is the profit soon, which is, fashion brands that are looking to break even or lose a little bit on that first time purchase, because they might get a purchase every 12 months, or if they're a great fashion brand, maybe more. And then obviously the profit later tends to be our subscription based businesses, right? And I guess, from your side, what do you think, or what businesses from your side fit into those key models, and what does it really mean for you?
Sure. So across those different kind of archetypes between you have your profit now, soon, and later, again, you're going to have a situation where certain categories of business fit into those, but equally every brand is going to be slightly different as well. We would see maybe 2 skincare businesses as an example. One doesn't actually see that repeat purchase within the same year, and another sees it on a compounding basis because the nature of the product is just very routine driven. So one of the kind of key eye-opening moments for people from a StoreHero perspective is showing them their lifetime value on a profit basis. And that really answers the question, where do you fall in this category? If you make most of that profit now, we're going to maintain it. If there's an opportunity to grow and actually invest, you have the other side, and again, supplements, anything like that. I think to your point, the piece where it often kind of gets a little bit caught and there's a messy middle is that kind of profit soon, because what will often happen is there's the potential for somebody to come back quickly. You might have a repeat revenue representing a significant percentage, but that doesn't necessarily mean that people are coming back quickly. I think people can often mistake repeat customer sales for people coming back within 3, 6, 9 months. I see that every day.
Yeah, it's my return rate's great, but is your actual 12-month repeat rate good? Like,
definitely.
They're like, Clavio looks great, and I've got a 30% returning customer rate. Okay, but that could be, and I say this all the time, they might be your loyal 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9th purchasers, not the people in StoreHero, in your LTV cohorts kind of metrics that are, are going from first to second purchase within that 12-month period. And
definitely
for us, for Megan and the CRM team, everything she's doing daily is, how am I improving that one metric? And me and Meg speak about it every week. And every brand, when we're one, auditing them, or two, internally auditing our brands, is setting a benchmark for that. And I want to come back to that, but also making sure that we're constantly improving that 12-month repeat rate. Now, it's important, and I think it scares brands when I show them this, because they might have had 5,000 customers, let's say, in June last year, if we're talking about 12 months, and 1,000 of them have come back within 12 months. That physically means, and when you really think about that, 4,000 people that bought from you haven't purchased again in 12 months.
Definitely.
For brands your side, and obviously we can talk about our side as well and what we're doing to improve that. What are you seeing that from a brand perspective that they're doing to improve that LTV ratio? Is it from a product basis? Is it, because I know obviously you've got your product tool on StoreHero.
Definitely. I think the other piece in that example specifically as well is, if 1/5 of 1,000 of our 5,000 customers are coming back, it means that not only the 4,000 aren't, but the 1,000 who are basically have to carry the whole group. So ultimately, whatever profit they generate, if you spread it across the group, maybe there's only an incremental rise in profit overall. So that's something I'd always recommend people be very careful about. We'll often hear people, when we first chat to them, say, okay, we'll be profitable by order 2. But a critical point is, when does that second order actually happen? If that's on average taking 3 months versus 13 months, that's going to leave you in a completely different profit position. But like, in other words, if you can actually, speak to the more positive context, if you can actually bring that down, it has such a compounding effect on profitability in the business, because to go from 25 to 35%, generating those repeat customer sales that are going to be high margin, you're not having to shell out again to Meta, Google, TikTok to acquire that customer, and you've completely changed the economics of the business. So what we really recommend businesses kind of, the way that we recommend they approach it, is to actually look at that kind of cohort view, which might be intimidating for a lot of people, but just think about it as like the customer journey over a, a little bit like a timeline over the following 12 months. What you want to do is stage manage that experience for them, so that, okay, you're increasing the likelihood of them coming back. And again, that's going to be driven by flows, but oftentimes people fall into like a pretty generic post-purchase flow that treats every customer the same.
Yeah.
So from our perspective, if we can show them, okay, customers who purchase product A first, here's what they do over time, product B. So actually I want to maybe double down on the ones that have good repeats naturally, but at the same time, maybe I can again give a bit of an assist to the people who aren't necessarily coming back. And the one element that's been really beneficial within our kind of growth coach, agencies like yourselves have been able to take advantage of our persona agent. And ultimately what that's been able to do is not only using AI to speed up the stuff you did anyway, but actually doing stuff that you never conceivably would have done yourself. So what it does is it goes through all your orders, finds what people are organically buying together, even if they're not in a bundle, how people are performing, what discount codes they're using, what countries they're buying from, what kind of UTM sources the orders come from, and it generates basically a persona map on exactly how you can stage manage that experience. So as an example, we ran this report for a skincare business and said, okay, 40% of our customers are entering our kind of ecosystem through this range of products. It's a high value product, but they're not coming back. And StoreHero noticed only 35% of people are buying the Hero SKU, which is your best repeat rate. So it recommended build a flow and build a bundle that combine both of those elements. So they're the pieces, again, that is a lot of heavy lifting. And if you're just looking at that crude overall summary, you're not going to get into the detail.
Honestly. And I think that, that product analysis is one of the first things that the CRM team do when they come in. Because I say this a lot, and I think I'm allowed to swear on this, I'm not sure. But, you either got basically a product, right? If people aren't coming back, let's be honest, it's a product, or you're not managing that customer journey well enough. It's as simple as that. So, we speak about it a lot. Hair syrup, their repeat rate was not where we needed it to be. We know they've got a fantastic product, fantastic story, but why were those consumers not coming back? And actually, we were chatting about this, and as we dug further and further and further into it, we noticed that people just weren't using the product right. So how easy is that then for us as a CRM team to say, well, okay, our job now is to make sure that people are using that product right, so that they're going to come back and purchase that second bottle, third bottle, fourth bottle of hair syrup. And what we noticed was, and probably similar to you, is once they'd made that third purchase, the significance of them, or the likelihood of them coming back, just doubled and doubled and doubled.
So much more.
And yeah, that was exciting to see. And now obviously, hair syrup's repeat rate is driving up massively. And I think, and this could be for different industries if you want, or overall, what would you say that 12-month repeat rate needs to look like? And I know it depends on numbers and figures, but what kind of, benchmarks are you seeing there?
Sure. So one kind of number that often floats around that I think is kind of nonsense is a 3-to-1 LTV to CAC on a revenue basis, because for that reason, when most people talk about lifetime value, they talk about lifetime revenue. You could have two businesses with the exact same lifetime revenue generated from a customer, and it's not giving you any information on what you can actually afford to spend to acquire that customer, with different product mix, different discounting, transaction fees, shipping costs incurred, not incurred, all these different things. So if you can actually see, okay, what is my profit and how does that increase over time? I think that's a good starting point. And the benchmark that I would typically use is a 2-to-1, basically LTV on a gross profit basis. So if I generate £1, $1, or euro of profit day one, ideally within 12 months, you would want to increase that to 2. Now, I would say that caters for that kind of middle category where most people operate. That's going to be lower if you're a furniture business. It's going to be much higher if you're a supplements business. But use that as a benchmark, because ultimately, again, going back to one of my original points, if you're trying to solve all the problems through your business through kind of playing around with that kind of meta ads budget toggle, you're fighting an uphill battle and you're making it so much more difficult for yourself. And visibility on some of these things to actually see what archetype you actually are as a business owner, where you sit and where the best opportunities for growth, just make it massively much more easy, I suppose.
100%. And actually, I've found recently, and I think that when I first joined Prospa a couple of years ago, I think that CRM was so undervalued still as an industry, and for ecom brands. But I really have started to see that brands are investing a lot more into it as Meta and PPC and whatever else has become more expensive. Brands are now going, okay, well, actually, I need to make sure that gross profit on repeat customers is where I need it to be. The only way I'm going to be able to do that is through having a great agency run my CRM, and I guess obviously that's a benefit for us, right? Sure. But yeah, it's been good to see that switch. I think for a long time, and when I was running Maison, I was so into what people had purchased and then what they were going to come back to purchase a second time. And, every brand in reality, we kind of cohorted into somebody that's bought a Lacoste top probably isn't going to go and buy a £2,000 Moncler jacket, right? It probably isn't going to happen. So, really, really segmenting those into different flows. And the first thing we do as a team when we're talking about CRM is we do exactly that. We look at the products, what the repeat rates are, and then we see, do we need to switch what we're doing here? If there's like you said, a bestseller that's has a really great repeat rate, let's push more into that. If there's a bestseller that hasn't, first of all, why can we fix that? If we can't, should we be even trying to push that across paid? Because if we know they're not going to come back a second time, we might be losing £2-3-4 on that first purchase. If they're not coming back, what's the point of getting them in as a consumer, right?
100%. And again, and that all should be taken into account when you're trying to decide how much you should be willing to pay for that customer. I had a call with a brand in the States, a beauty brand, a pretty big brand as well. From their perspective, they were really debating and kind of tied themselves in a bit of a knot around repricing. They wanted to kind of reprice the product to kind of expand their margin, but they had a really good repeat rate within the business and really good lifetime value, but they just never had visibility on it. Okay, you could increase your product pricing by $3, $4, $5. That's a tricky thing to do. You're got to get pushback from customers. It's a risky move to the extent that you're maybe shifting your space where you are in the market. And I was able to say, if you can actually get 20% of people to come back one more time per year, you'll generate 3 times the amount of profit than you would by repricing, taking the risk, putting the burden of that on customers. And again, it's such a better signal as well that you're generating more profit from that customer, not because you've increased your price, but you've justified the value of your product and you've steered them along that journey. I think people are so inundated. I think oftentimes brand founders seem to disconnect how they operate as a consumer versus what they expect their consumers and their customers to kind of act and behave. And principally, if you can actually justify that value up front, and again, stage manage that experience on the CRM side, it just makes things a lot easier.
Obviously, I joined Prospa 18 months ago now, full time, as you know. And in that period, I wanted to really use the experience, I guess, building and selling ecom brands over the last few years. And I'm so passionate as a you, and I know, we have this Wednesday talk every Wednesday that we dive into ecom. And I really wanted to put something together to really help brands that are, I guess, that one are struggling, 2 are in one of those 2 like plateauer or decliners that can give some value based off of all of the conversations we constantly have, based off of all of the stuff that you've taught me, all of the stuff that I've learned over the last 10 years in ecom, and just give something to brands to read and implement stuff straight away. Because I think that's the most important thing is if a brand has come to us and they've started to think about everything we spoke to today, it's such an easier conversation.
Sure.
I basically started 18 months ago building this growth guide, and it's evolved over time. And I guess every few weeks, we're updating it, seeing what else is going on in the industry, whether it's AI creative, whether it's what we've talked about today with key benchmarks. Because I think, and I said this before, and coming from brand side and owning ecom business, I know I'm constantly comparing myself to everybody else, constantly. And it's a burden, right? Because you think everyone else is doing better than you, everyone else has got it figured out. And when you start to read the growth guide and you understand that actually people haven't, it's such an eye-opening moment for brands. And I think it is important. And one thing that we will say is that when brands have read the growth guide, have started to understand the bits I've put in about, StoreHero, the unit economics, the financials, the benchmarking, whether it's AI creative, whether it's how they should be structuring a meta ad account, that initial first conversation is so much easier to have with them because they already understand. And I guess from your side, consumers that are coming to you on StoreHero, are you finding that people have more of an understanding now than they ever have, or do you still think there's that lag and they should be going and reading the growth guide?
Businesses are kind of been forced to reckon with these kind of core unit economics, the realities of their business. I think the challenge that a lot of them have is they know there's an issue there. They feel there's a disconnect between marketing and finance, but they actually don't have the numbers to validate their underlying thoughts. And even more than that, kind of systematize a response to solving that problem. So I think the growth guide has been, as we've been kind of chatting about it over the last couple of weeks and months, I think is really good at that, because from a StoreHero perspective, we're trying to not just position ourselves as another tool, as you guys aren't trying to position yourselves just as another agency. It's well, again, I kind of used it in different contexts before. Anyone who makes that kind of unsubstantiated claim, we can do things better, you need to validate why. Well, it's actually not magic. It's because we have a better process, we have a better approach, and I think the guide lays that out really well. Because
of all the data we see across all of our brands, and obviously with you guys as well, we're able to constantly update the growth guide. And as our ICP as an agency has changed, and it has massively, I think about 6 years ago, working with businesses that were doing 50, 100 grand, and now working with businesses from really anywhere between that 2 to 20 million, or that kind of the next step, the 7 to 8 figures. I think I have kept amending that growth guide. One, for our ICP, second, for all the conversations we have. And I think that it's going to be useful for those types of brands. So yeah, look, it covers all the key ecom fundamentals that I think is super important, and I know you do. And I think that would, it'll be great for anybody that wants to download that and have a read, even before coming to speak to us, you guys, Definitely. Whoever it might be, because it just gives them that, that first step into understanding more about ecom. But look, I'm getting told that we're kind of getting over time now. So look, it's been awesome to chat to you today, and hopefully we've given people a load of value that they'll get out of this. And I guess, where can they contact you and if they want to have a conversation? Yeah, no worries. So if you want to learn more about the StoreHero platform, our growth coach, how we work with agencies and how we kind of fit together in that partnership, storehero.ai. So you can easily sign up for a trial, see how the platform works, and get within the space of a couple of minutes, within a day or two, not only connect quickly, but actually get some immediate points of value, know where you are as a business, and use that to build a plan to actually hit your goals this year. Perfect. And just one last thing. So if people do want, obviously, to see your platform, or do want our 8-figure growth guide, we're going to put it in the description below this. Nice.